Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well tonight. Well, it's about 12:30 a.m. and I'm jacked up on espresso and listening to my favorite band, Dead Cross, and I just got pumped, and I wanted to do an upload for you guys. But not just any upload, some terrifying encounters. Before we get into that, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. They're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, and the links to those books are in the description as well. Now, everyone, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Tonight's first, truly bizarre, but terrifying encounter. Tonight, my brother and I, both in our late 20s, took our dogs out to do their business in the same place as always. A little later than usual, I'll add, around 1 in the morning, when all of a sudden a black cat walks out through a gate on the sidewalk we are on, about 2 cars away for distance. It started walking towards us, trying to hide itself from me. It was going for my dog at first, a medium-sized multi-poo, like a panther in the wild stalking its prey. I jumped in front to spook it off, but it acted like it didn't see me, so I hurried and picked up my dog. But when I did, it turned its attention on my brother, standing a few feet away. So I'm trying to shoo it off, but when I saw its face, it had an old man's face from the ears down, like someone took an old man's face and stitched it on a cat. When it saw me look at its face, it had a surprised expression. I was shocked, just paralyzed, all these things running through my mind. I truly didn't know what to do. I turned and looked at my brother to see if he was seeing the same thing. He was pale, looking at it with our other dog in his hands. We both looked back at it. It took a second to compose itself, and it turned and ran into the street. I watched it cross the street. As soon as it left, a sudden feeling of danger, scared, and dread fell upon both of us. We were both visibly upset. This was a fear I haven't felt since I was a kid. Feeling was more of a traumatizing fear. Now we are both pretty big dudes, been around the block, fooled around, done some shit, and now trying to better ourselves, but both of us scared on the verge of falling apart under these feelings like leave now or die. Does anyone know anything about this creature we saw? Tonight's second encounter. Sugar Creek, Missouri. I was walking to work. I'm a high school teacher after visiting my aging grandmother, who lives on the location. I took this back road alleyway behind the house since it was a shortcut and I loved the scenery there. It was around 6 in the morning, so it was still kind of dark. The way the alleyway is that it's a tiny single-lane road with trees all around it, and I was headed west toward the community garden. I heard some chittering sound, so I assumed it was a bird or something. I heard a trash can fall over. Just the neighbor's dog rummaging through the trash, I thought. I saw something behind a tree, and it looked like it was trying to hide from me. It chittered at me and made a mad dash across the pavement into the other trees, and I didn't see much of it. But it was at least 6 feet tall and had black stripes on its body. It stood upright and had 4-fingered hands, and was bow-legged. It managed to scratch the strap on my satchel when it ran, and the claw marks looked more precise, not ragged. I don't know if it tried to attack me or if it was scared of me and brushed the strap on accident when it ran away. I tried telling my buddy about it, but he was sarcastic about it, so I assumed no one else would believe me. I only found out about creatures like this the other day, and I'd figure I'd share my experience with the Raccoon Man, as I dubbed him. Tonight's third terrifyingly bizarre encounter. In the summer of 2016 or 17, I found myself on a bicycle quite a bit. I'd just ride around the sweet old town of Green Cove Springs, Florida, between the murky brown waters of the St. Johns River and the vibrant green springs, plants that lasted until winter was well set in. This was a beautiful place to be. Sometime after the 4th of July, I was making my semi-routine journey up to the guitar store that was local. It was one of my favorite places to be at the time, and I found myself there almost every day of the week. Most of the time, I would just take the back way to get up there, so I could see all of the beautiful brick roadwork and the overhanging trees that the Spanish moss grew off that shaded the road. Made it a really nice and pretty back there. On this particular day, I decided I'll just keep on riding and went right past my turn to go to the guitar store and found myself in an area I had never been before. It stunk and it smelled and it was just foul. All the dirt had turned into mud and the trees had fuzzy yellow moss growing on them, and I couldn't hear any birds. Now, you would expect to hear birds when you're deep in the woods like I was, but it was dead silent. Only a few crickets and some other nasty bugs were audible. Despite being an overall nasty place to be, it was rather pretty. The sun shone through the trees and made nice, warm little rays of sunlight that danced off the wet, muddy ground. Well, after standing there for a while and looking around, I spied a log that I could set my bike against and have a seat. Well, it must have been really comfortable because before I knew it, the time had flown by. I was now watching the sunset. Mind you, it was about 1 in the afternoon when I left my house that day, and it only took me about 20 minutes to get to this little spot. So, as I'm watching the sunset, I think to myself, I haven't been here that long, have I? I took out my phone, and sure enough, it was about 6:30 p.m. Well, I figured I might as well just watch the sunset now that I'm out here, so I did. That's when I saw what I saw. 10 minutes after I watched the sun go below the tree line, I figured I should probably get going. I got on my bike and started pedaling. As I'm going down this little dirt and gravel path that led to the spot I was just at, I looked up and see what I initially thought to be a tree. However, due to the fact that I was going slow on my bike, I got a really good look at this thing. It kind of looked like a man perched up in the tree like a bird. It had very close textured hair quality to it, and it had a very unusual claw-like feet, very similar to the feet of an eagle, or possibly a crane, kind of like a mixture of the two. After I got a really good gander at this thing, I just looked forward on my bike, trying to think about what I had just saw. And when I'm picturing it in my head again, I have an urge to turn around, so I did. This thing was looking at me. Its eyes were very large, very similar in proportion to the AA of South American jungles. In fact, the whole facial structure of this thing looked very primate-like, and quite similar to the AA, but much too large to be one. Its eyes also had a bit of a glow to them, kind of like when you take a picture of a cat with a flash on it, and its eyes shine, and you go and look at the photo. At this point, I'm a bit shaken at the whole thing and just tell myself to continue down the trail and don't think about it. Eventually, I get home safe and sound, but let me tell you, I didn't catch even a second of sleep that night. I had convinced myself that the thing I saw was going to come through my window any minute and have a nice little snack. Today's fourth terrifying encounter. This incident was the most terrifying experience of my life. This happened in the fall of 1982 in Baxter State Park, Maine. I lived in Manchester, New Hampshire at the time and desperately wanted to get one last camping trip in before the weather changed and the region would become buried in snow, and tourists from out of state for skiing season. It was early November, and it was still warm during the day, and nice and chilly at night. Perfect for sitting around a fire and relaxing. I loved the outdoors, I still do, but the events of that night in Maine would leave a mark on me for the rest of my life. My wife worked all weekend at the hospital downtown, and both the kids were at Grandma and Grandpa's for the weekend. I called in sick to work, loaded up my Bronco, strapped the canoe on the roof, and hit the interstate. I was on the water late in the afternoon. I loved this area because of how remote it was. I was a few miles from my launch site, where the truck was parked, when I spotted a perfect place to camp. I paddled toward the shore. This is a great spot, I thought to myself. I set up my little tent, built a fire, and unfolded my packed chair to relax. The day turned into night, and I crashed out in the tent. The following day, I awoke to the sounds of birds chirping. It was a little cooler, but still great weather. I took my camera out into the forest to take some pictures. I did some fishing and just enjoyed the peaceful stillness of this remote wilderness. The day was uneventful, and soon after dinner I lied in my tent with my flashlight reading. I must have dozed off because I awoke startled by something moving outside of my tent. I lie still, but instinct told me there was something outside. I could hear the carefully placed steps of something. There are moose and black bear up there. Moose can be very dangerous if you walk upon them by surprise. The bears generally smell you before you see them and keep away. I lie still and listened. Whatever it was had stopped at the entrance flap of my tent. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could make out a faint, shadowy shape. I was wide awake now and full alert. Whatever it was, I could hear it sniffing around and panting. I slowly began to unzip the tent when it ran off. I unzipped the flat of my tent and looked out just in time to see the branches swaying and hear the sound of something moving through the brush into the deep woods. The sounds of the footfalls told me one important thing, that it was on two legs. That could not be right. I hadn't seen any other people since entering the park and leaving my truck at the trailhead. The tourist season for leaf peepers had passed, and even so, someone couldn't only reach this location by waterway. I suppose somebody could be out here, someone I hadn't seen or heard until they came sniffing and snorting around my campsite in the middle of the night. I guess anything's possible. As the sun rose, I ate my breakfast but remained on guard. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I felt a presence in the forest, someone or something just out of sight. I kept my .45 revolver when I camped out here in the northern woods. I wasn't concerned about the wildlife so much as the weirdos you may run across, the meth heads, the backcountry type. In my experience, the scariest thing you can come across when you're alone in the deep woods is another human. I couldn't be sure if someone was out here, but the paranoia had begun to take hold. It was dark now, and I was inside of my tent. I kept the revolver close and my boots on. I was done playing games. I sure didn't plan on shooting anybody, but I was damn sure to show them I was no easy target. I sat up quickly. I must have fallen asleep again because I was startled awake by movement all around the tent. The shadows everywhere, on all sides, in all directions. I could hear sniffing and snorting, low grunting, and raspy breathing. What the hell is happening? I thought in a panic. It didn't sound like people. But the height of the shadows cast against the flaps of the tent in the moonlight revealed prominent, upright figures. There must have been 5, maybe 6 on all sides. Fear gripped me as the realization came over. I was surrounded. The low growling started. It was answering back on the other side and all around me. Low, deliberate growling. Were these coyotes? Were the massive shadows just the light playing tricks on me? The growling increased in pitch and intensified, and I knew an attack was imminent. I pulled my revolver and fired straight up into the air. The next moments were a complete blur. I charged through the tent, just the clothes on my back, my .45, and the truck keys in my pocket. I bolted straight for the canoe and muscled it into the water. jumped in and began paddling. I never looked back until I got far enough from the shore. I should have never looked back. They were standing completely still on the riverbank, their bodies crouched down with heads low, eyes reflecting in the moonlight. They looked like giant coyotes, or maybe even wolves, 6 in total. I was transfixed on what I was seeing. I'd never seen a coyote this large, this massive. As I sat in the safety of my little canoe studying these creatures, they did something I'll never forget. They began to stand on their hind legs. Each one would slowly raise onto 2 legs. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They stood like men. These things, these creatures that were almost ambushed me as their prey. I turned and furiously paddled as the howling rang out behind me. Tonight's final terrifying but bizarre encounter. Years later, I still can't explain what I saw. 7 years ago, southeastern Wisconsin. So far, I've only told a few people close to me about this experience. It took place in southeastern Wisconsin, roughly 7 years ago. I went with a girl I was seeing to a nature center about 20 minutes from my home. I was 19 at the time. She was a year younger. It was about 10 p.m. when we arrived. We brought a blanket with us and made our way up to the main hill that overlooks the city of Waukesha from a very long distance. Up on this hill, through some pretty heavy woods, there is an area right at the top of the hill that has a wooden bench with no backrest. It was just the 2 of us, as we were the only car in the parking area. I've been there on the other side, down the steep hill once before, so I had a good idea on where we were going to lay the blanket out. We set up about 25 to 35 yards down the hill, away from the top bench area. Mind you, aside from the old wooden bench, it's nothing but woods and tall grass fields. We lied there for a good 45 minutes, looking up at the sky. I knew from being here in the past that if somebody else comes and they're at the top of the hill, it's impossible to see them from the area we were at, but you can easily hear them. At around the 45-minute mark, something caught my attention. It sounded like somebody was up on the top of the hill, rustling the leaves and dirt around. I didn't want to startle her, but she realized I was paying attention to whoever was up on the hill. The moon was fairly bright that night, so I had a decent view toward the top, but, as I said, it's almost impossible to see a person up there. And if you do, it's only the top of their head. At this moment, I start hearing an almost huffing, puffing, light growling noise. I thought it was really odd, and crouched down a bit, still my eyes locked up top. I assured her through whispers to just stay down and stay still. We really didn't feel like getting noticed by anyone up there. Here's where things take a very odd turn. As I'm hearing these noises, seeing nothing up top, a figure appears smack dab on the exact spot where the bench is located. The noises continue, so here I am, mind racing, trying to keep calm and make sense of what the hell is going on. I decide it's just some guy standing on the bench acting like a weirdo, but the more I watch, it's clear it's not a person. I was able to make out a very thick, dark figure from where the belly button would be on a human. All the way on up, actually. I'd say about 5 inches up from the belly button area. I watched on as the figure's head went side to side like a madman, huffing and puffing, basically completely spazzing out. The head of this creature was much, much larger than any man I'd ever seen. It was evident, though, the moonlight I had, that this thing was one solid dark, but not completely dark color. I'm in complete disbelief, still fighting to play it cool, as the girl I'm with is still behind me, trying to stay as flat as possible, and facing the opposite direction. The creature stayed in one spot, never pacing, yet head snapping side to side, almost studying the hill and the land. Around it, I assumed this thing must be standing atop the bench, making it appear tall. Nope, dead wrong. For whatever reason, this creature snaps its head to the right one last time and takes off with an acceleration that scared the living shit out of me. It didn't jump off of any bench. I witnessed this thing run on an angle down the side of the hill for about 30 to 40 yards, upright, at a speed that no human being is capable of. I sat there, jaw dropped, as it vanished into the woods. I instantly turned around, snatched the blanket while pulling her up, and said, "We need to go. Now." I didn't even care that this thing could possibly be lurking in the woods. I didn't even want a chance staying out on that hill for another second. We finally are about 100 yards from the car. No, I didn't run into the thing, but both of us heard the most horrifying screech yelp back maybe 100 to 200 yards. That lasted for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, a noise I can say I've never even come close to hearing before. She was beyond terrified, grabbing me as we stood completely still. The final 100 yards we jogged, trying to make as little noise as possible. This thing had to be over 8 feet tall, at least 300 pounds, no clothes, one solid color. Maybe animal type, pissed off I'd say sounds. Ran on 2 legs. The part that still freaks me out the most is the speed at which the creature ran. It was not normal. Last thing I'll add is the area is located about 30 minutes from the Bray Road Beast sightings. Can anybody relate to what I saw or maybe make sense of what it could have been? I haven't been back in that area since that night. Close, but I never went back out into those woods. Another edit. Another reason the running part freaked me out the most was because for the speed at which the creature was running, it stayed almost abnormally upright. As in, saying you're watching a track and field event, the runner's arms swing forward and backward constantly as they run. Their shoulders cut inwards with each swing of the arm. This thing did not display a normal type of run. It almost seemed to use its legs entirely, while keeping its arms quite tight to itself, with its elbows bent to form an L. There was some arm movement, but nowhere near that of what humans do when they run. And, for as fast as it was going, I had this feeling that it was capable of going even faster. As soon as it started to run, the huffing, puffing, growling noises stopped. Or maybe I just wasn't able to hear them. I also want to add that some 3 or 4 years after this all took place, my buddy started dating a girl that went to high school with us. I never talked to her in school. One night, on our way to a baseball game, she proceeds to tell us a story of a sighting she had with her brother years before on the glacial Drumlin bike trail. I never told her about what I had seen yet. I asked her when we got to the game if she could draw what she saw. She took out a pen out of her purse, and I gave her a piece of paper from the glove compartment. I was absolutely shocked because she basically drew the same exact thing I witnessed. When I say exact, I mean scary exact. Through getting to know her, her mother told us on a later occasion about how scared her and her brother were that day when they got home. The part that also freaked me out is that when the creature saw them, it took a massive jump and took off at a very high speed into the woods. The trail is located about 20 minutes away from the nature center where my sighting took place. To this day, neither of us has seen anything like it, beside the time where I believed I had seen a wolf cross the road on all fours, as possible to see a wolf down here, but rare. Woo doggy! Wow, I'm telling you, when I said terrifying and bizarre, I meant it. And I actually have some goosebumps from the last 2. The second to last one, the one in Baxter, Maine, actually it's pronounced Baxter, when you're up in Maine. My aunt would take me and my cousin, who's my age, up there camping, and we would see the aurora borealis or the northern lights every time we went. Not every time, but it seemed like every time. One night we saw the harvest moon, and we actually thought the forest was on fire. That's how bright it was, and pretty creepy. It was a really creepy event, actually, now that I think about it. But, my goodness, I mean, that last encounter, what the heck? Only 30 minutes away from the Bray Road Beast? Yee! We know what that is, man. We know what was running through those woods, brother. That was a Dogman. And you're lucky to be with us still. The second encounter, where the guy dubs it the Raccoon Man, I really think that was a Dogman. I'm not really familiar with any cryptid Raccoon Man, but, you know, I mean, he could have been a very short, muzzled dog man, possibly a female, being shorter. But yeah, wow, definitely bizarre, definitely terrifying. So I don't know about you, but I'm going to be looking around the corners here when I go to bed soon. But I got another 20-30 minutes of Dead Cross listening to. And if you ever get a chance and you're into metal, not metal, but rock, or Faith No More, the band, Mr. Bungle, the lead singer, Mike Patton, is the lead singer of Dead Cross. It actually has Dave Lombardo from Slayer as the drummer. He's also in Mr. Bungle. It's a kick-ass band. Skin of the Redneck is probably one of my favorite songs by them. Check it out. Anyway, have a great night, guys. See ya!